Every time I release one of those obscure videos, regardless of the platform therefore, there's always someone who played all the games. And I'm kinda sorry for them, cause while I played a lot myself, on all the systems I had access to, there are hundreds if not thousands of games I never even knew of. And discovering them now after so many years is just hella fun. So hopefully you'll enjoy learning about today's 10 with me. Wings of Death is a vertically scrolling shoot-em-up in a fantasy setting, quite unusual for the genre. You play as mage turned into a winged creature on a quest to defeat a wicked witch. And if I can add something here, the gamebox cover is something else. I have all sorts of thoughts and observations when looking at it. But I'm gonna keep them to myself, take a look at it. Anyway, given when Wings of Death was released and that it was a port from Atari ST, it's really impressive. It offers quite a few weapons to choose from, each with several upgrade levels. Every upgrade yields a more powerful version of a chosen weapon. Switching weapons, however, resets your upgrade, so it's advisable to pick the one you want to stick with as soon as possible and then keep on investing in upgrading it. During gameplay you'll be able to transform into a few different creatures, a giant eagle, a griffin and a dragon. While Wings of Death is fantasy themes, it's just its clothing, and the game is your standard shoot 'em up with all the tropes of the genre. So numerous different enemies coming down the screen in formations, and they can either be destroyed or avoided, as the missed ones don't carousel back on the screen in any way like enemies in 1942 for instance do. Interestingly enough, other than the upgrades, enemies drop downgrades from time to time too. They are marked with a skull and will either downgrade your weapon power or reduce your energy level. Each world features an end boss, and they are usually much bigger and real test of skill. While Wings of Death was never as popular as some more well-known titles that came from arcades were, it was as good if not better than most of them. And if you enjoy shooters, it's one to track down. A lido is an old English word for an open-air swimming pool or a fashionable beach resort. It's not something that I knew before researching the game. It's also not a word I ever used in any conversations I've been in or listened to. Anyway, Hillsea Lido is a game that's obscure because of how it was distributed, not because of its quality, which in fact is fantastic. Vulcan Software, the developer, never sold their games in shops, but rather advertised them in gaming mags and sold via mail order. All Vulcan Software games, apart from famous Valhalla duology, were entirely different in terms of theme and genre. It made for an interesting library and one worth tracking down if you're an Amiga collector. Anyway, coming back to Hillsea Lido. It's a seaside management sim not far off thematically from games like Theme Park. You start the game with £1 million and an empty beach and promenade to develop on. Your ultimate goal is obviously to earn as much money as possible, but to do so you have to create as attractive locales as you can too. So, you'll start with something simple like an eatery or a shop, you'll hire staff, set their wages, order supplies for your built attractions, and finally set up prices for your wares and services. You will also need to keep the seaside clean, so you'll hire cleaners, someone to collect the money from all your businesses, and preferably a bodyguard to keep that fellow safe and make sure that he doesn't get mugged on his way back with all the hard-earned dough. Naturally, in time some of your stalls may require repairing or maintenance, and there are people who can be paid to sort it out too. A lifeguard is always a good idea given how smart and responsible people are, right? So do it all, do it well, and keep expanding, and you're on a road to riches and to have a lot of fun playing Hillsea Lido. Mike the Magic Dragon is not a great game. It's not bad per se, but it's definitely not great. It's a single-screen platformer where you play as Mike, the Magic Dragon. You've been imprisoned in a castle far from home and you have to escape. In each level there are 3 letters spread out that need to be collected in the right order, forming an acronym associated with Amiga computing. And jewels, but they're just there for picking up and form nothing. Well, they may be forming Mike's retirement fund, but that's pretty much it. Collecting the letters in the right order rewards you with a key to the next level. There are however enemies that try to stop you in your tracks. Why? Nobody knows, but they're there and they really want you to never leave the castle. There are also an odd assortment of creatures ranging from ghosts to, tomatoes. It's video game logic, so I shouldn't be surprised, but here we are. I am. The game has an anti-camping feature, sending spiders after you if you stay in one spot for too long, so you gotta move and keep on plowing through those levels non-stop. As you go about conquering the levels or falling off the platforms, you'll find parachutes, which can break your fall. And you will fall from time to time, as some jumps are especially unforgiving and demanding pixel-perfect aim, which for some, present company included, is a bit off-putting. Mike the Magic Dragon is a game that feels like an 8-bit platformer in an early 16-bit clothing, meaning the premise and mechanics are very 8-bit-like, with limited for the time variety and design principles. And I wouldn't be surprised finding the game on C64 playing identically but with a bit less flashy presentation. So, yeah, do whatever you want with that knowledge. Personally, as much as I do enjoy my simple games on C64, I don't really dig them on a system as powerful as Amiga. Base Jumpers is an Amiga-exclusive platformer, and it's best when played with others. I mean, you can play it alone, it's just not very fun. While it can be played by up to 4 players, 2 is a bare minimum to enjoy it. Each level is different building in a different geographical locale that you have to climb. Well, not really climb per se, but platform your way from the bottom to the very top in this vertically scrolling affair. As fast as you can against the clock, preferably with all your lives and energy intact. The buildings are filled with thematically appropriate enemies patrolling, and you have to either avoid them or dispose of them Mario style, jumping on their heads. While you fight your way up, certain letters may drop from enemies, and if you pick them up and arrange in the right 3-letter combinations, a bonus will be awarded. And it can be anything ranging from points through extra lives to bonus stage. When you finally reach the top, it's time to give game's titles justice and jump off of the building. Regardless of how many of you actually play the game, there's always 4 jumpers, and the CPU just takes place of these that are not human controlled. As you fall down, rapidly gaining velocity, you need to dodge flagpoles and overhangs, and avoid being pushed into them by your fellow base jumpers. Your aim is to reach the ground first intact, which in multiplayer is easier said than done and most of the fun that the game offers. If you have someone with you, it's definitely worth a playthrough, but if you don't, you may very well just skip it altogether. Brataccas is a science fiction action-adventure built on remains of overhyped project Bandersnatch, which in itself deserves a video of its own. I believe, however, that Nostalgia Nerd already covered it in his channel, and it's a bloody good watch, so make sure to go there and check it out. I'll link it in the description below. You play as Kain, a genetic engineer who developed technology for creating superior people. The government sees it as an opportunity to use it to breed supple soldiers, which really doesn't sit well with you and you refuse to assist. In retaliation, the government frames you for treason and puts a bounty on your head. When both lawful and lawless are after you, you've no choice but to flee the earth. All to find proof of your innocence and that you're being framed. To clear your name, you have to travel to a remote mining asteroid, the titular Brataccas. The inhabitants of it, however, are corrupt and often dangerous, so figuring out who will hold the information and then getting them to share with you is what you'll be doing. You can move around flick screen world, pick up and drop objects and talk to NPCs. They all have their own agendas and put their own interests first, so you'll have to work with them to get them to help you. While the interface is semi-modern, allowing you to pick things up, there's no easy way of giving them to anyone, so to do so, you have to drop them in vicinity of a character that's supposed to get or use them. It's a clunky solution, but it works, so I shouldn't complain too much really. Graphically, Brataccas is disappointing. Sure, it uses high-resolution mode of 640 by 200, but it doesn't display graphics in full horizontal width. Looking suspiciously, as username Mostro noticed on Lemon Amiga, like a direct port from Sinclair QL. I mean, Brataccas never released on QL, but was originally developed on it when Clive Sinclair purchased rights to Bandersnatch from then bankrupt Imagine Software, and wanted to release it on his machine. Brataccas is an interesting title to check out, but I'm not convinced that it's a good enough game to complete. Bill's Tomato Game is a puzzler very similar in its concept to Sierra's The Incredible Machine, and it's entirely mouse-driven. It is divided into a series of single-screen levels, each of them being a unique self-contained puzzle. Your objective is always to move Bill, who happens to be an anthropomorphic tomato, from left side of the screen to the right, straight onto the conveyor belt. Even though Amiga's screen is only 320 pixels wide, between where you start and where you need to get to, the game drops various obstacles and dangers. Most of them with the sole purpose of squishing, crushing, cutting or otherwise destroying our little red round Bill. You can't let that happen, right? After all, Bill may be the only intelligent life form to ever evolve from a tomato, and it would be a waste if he ended up in a bottle of ketchup or Campbell's tomato soup. So, in order to complete the levels and save Bill, you have to use various tools to make sure that he gets to where he's going. And they are an electric fan, boosting Bill's movement sideways, or glide really, as it only ever works when Bill's mid-air. There's also a trampoline, which I'm not gonna explain cause that would insult your intelligence. Jack in a Box, the creepiest toy ever, is used to propel Tomato upwards, and Blocking Box that can stop Bill's movement short. The game is composed out of 10 worlds, 10 levels each, so 100 stages of puzzling fun. That said, each gadget can only be used a set number of times in each level, and you can only try and see if your plan works a limited number of times per level too. And all that while the clock is running. Bill's Tomato Game is rather demanding from the get-go, and while it's not the most difficult game out there, it doesn't really teach you to play but demand results straight up. It's interesting, but arguably not as good as aforementioned Incredible Machine. Distinctive softwares for the sports boxing is a true gem, somewhat hidden though, as I hardly ever hear people talk about it. This however may be an issue on my side, cause when you talk to the mirror you don't usually expect it to reply or even more so, say something genuinely new. Bad jokes aside, For the Sports Boxing is actually a 3D boxing game that despite badly aged simple polygonal graphics is surprisingly deep and fun. It offers an interesting career mode where you can lead your fighter through series of fights and improve his stats between them to finally become the champion. What makes it stand out between other boxing games is how naturally the boxers move, how heavy the hits feel and how unexpectedly spot on the collision detection is. Even if it's not the best boxing game on the Amiga, although jury's not out on this yet, it's definitely one of the most fun to play. Just give it a go and trust me, it's worth it. Entity is an action platformer which unique selling point is definitely the protagonist, who is not a dude, frog with soft drink released powers, fish with arms or any other creature we've grown used to, but an impressively bosomed lady in skin-tight leather suit, Artemis. And while sadly this was something devs were using to lure teenage boys to buy the game, it wasn't enough. Because while Entity is decent, Flashback that came out more or less in the same time is leagues ahead of it, in terms of everything. Story, gameplay and animation. We could argue which had better graphics, with Entity's more realistic approach to it, but that's beside the point, as it's never graphics that make the game. Especially when all the animations are really jerky and leave a bad aftertaste, feeling couple of classes worse than the presentation that encircles them. What matters really is playability, and while Entity could hardly be called boring, dropping you god knows where and sending to fight various dinosaurs and other odd creatures, Flashback is just better. Simple as that. The game is composed out of 5 big levels, each ending with an interluding short boss level, last one being the titular Entity. You start with a basic fireball shot, which soon enough with upgrades allows for shooting horizontally and diagonally upwards, and then even further changes into a scatter shot. So there's some progression to the game other than the changing backgrounds and enemies. I'm not gonna lie, although it's probably easy to figure out from what I said so far, but despite Entity being a good average platformer, I was never a fan, so I won't try to convince you to look it up. But it was not a very well known or popular title, so deserves a spot in this video nonetheless. And there's one thing about it that I actually really appreciate, that even games like Flashback didn't do. When you squat on a platform, the screen will scroll down to reveal what's below it, so jumping down with hope of finding a platform below rather than instant death is definitely not an issue with Entity. Warlock's Quest, aka Warlock, is an action side-scrolling game where you play as a wizard/sorcerer, or even better, a warlock, who's on a mission through many dark locations to find 8 magical objects that would allow him to recover a powerful magical jewel called Karna. The graphics are really minuscule, comparable in size and sprites to likes of Benefactor or Lemmings. Your character can walk left and right, jump and shoot fireballs from his staff. Shooting uses up energy, and there can never be any more shots on the screen than 2 at once. The game screen is divided into 2 horizontally, with top near half displaying all the informations like life and weapon energy and such, and bottom is again divided into displaying the play area of over and underworld. There are special passage points that allow for switching between top and bottom play layer, and these can be platforms and stairs among others, and there's also holes through which you may occasionally fall down if you're not careful. The assortment of enemies that you'll face is quite wide for a small game like that, as there are around 30 different ones, most dangerous of these only appearing in the underground layer. It is also where the most traps can be found, or really should be avoided and not found, but you get what I mean. When you touch an enemy, it depletes your life energy and consecutive touches will cost you a life. Stronger enemies take more hits but are permanently gone when killed, the weakest ones die from 1 hit but respawn often. Slain enemies may drop pickups in form of energy refills and armor bonuses among other, and should be something you keep your eyes on at all times. Someone on Lemon Amiga website called Warlock's Quest a poor man's Ghost and Goblins, and while it's not factually correct, it's actually not that far off estimation of what it is. So yeah, if it looks like fun to you, give it a shot. You've nothing to lose really, just time. Amnios is a deeply flawed, always scrolling shoot 'em up, but let's not get ahead of things. You play as a spaceship that has to destroy 10 enemy organic planets. It's done by laying destruction to their inner organs, so heart, eyes, brain, etc. And you can do it with use of your regular multi-directional shooting laser or with special dedicated weapons. These special weapons are obtained by collecting samples of DNA and bringing them back to your fathership. Yes, you heard that right, not mothership. It then generates a power-up for you that needs to be collected when ready. Because it's fathers that are known for spawning life inside them and not mothers, right? Right. Color of deposited DNA roughly corresponds to the type of the power-up that you'll get. The levels are filled with bodies to the brim, and there are a whole plethora of different creatures, from blobs of various kinds through worm-like monsters to bug-eyed nasties, and everything in between. Basically, whatever monstrosities you might have had nightmares of, they're there. All levels can be completed in 2 ways, either by saving all humans stranded on the planet Defender style and bringing them back to your fathership, or by destroying every enemy that you can find. The latter is easier said than done, as there are hundreds upon hundreds of enemies, and they're of various sizes, spewing bullets left and right and chasing you constantly in this overwhelmingly hectic action shoot. When you manage to do it, however, the Guardian spawns and you need to defeat it. Fight with it is a bit underwhelming as compared to what's usually happening in the game, so there's that. Amnios is an interesting and beautifully crafted shooter that's designed in a way that seems to be made specifically to keep me away from it. There's way too much crazy action all at once on the screen, and some hits seem unavoidable, with enemies being so large and so many of them all at once. It's not a game for me. Is it one for you? Now, I believe you're gonna have to try it out and make up your own mind. So, how do you like today's episode? Did at least few of these games were something you never knew of? Any of them looking interesting or something you'd like to try? Make sure to let me know, and come back to watch the next video, which you know may very well drop tomorrow in 5 days, cause you never know. But if you subscribe, and 70% of you sadly are not, then you always get new video in your subs box when it drops. Even better, if you click the bell, YouTube will send you a notification when the next one's out. So think about it. If you feel generous and would like to support my channel, I'd appreciate Patreon and YouTube memberships. They really help a lot and will go towards replacing my aging editing rig. You will always get access to new videos a day early too. But if you can't or don't want to do that, likes and subscribes are great too. Most of all, however, I would like to take a second here and thank all the YouTube Let's Play and playthrough creators, from whose amazing videos short bits were taken for this one as a video background to my commentary. They're all amazing, and thanks to their efforts, retro community can prevail for years longer and in better form than it could have otherwise. So thank you. For me though, this is all, so have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Peace.